Hey YouTube, Longbows Post 975. I have to say something. Right off the bat, I have to say, I love Space Harrier. I love it. I absolutely love Space Harrier. It's not my favourite arcade game of all time. It's not the best arcade game of all time, but it has a very, very sort of specific place in my heart. But we'll get to that. Now, I want to ask a question. I want to ask you, have you ever bought the same game more than once? Now, I don't mean have you ever bought the same game on the same system more than once, because we all have that go-to game, you know, a game that we buy, we play, we sell or trade, and then somehow we end up purchasing again. For me, for some reason, it's Rocky on the GameCube. I don't know why, there's just something very appealing about smashing the crap out of Drago. But what I want to talk about, is there a game that you loved from the arcade that left such an impression on you, that as you've sort of, you know, progressed through the hardware decisions you made or the systems that you've purchased, with each subsequent step being more powerful than the previous system, you've gone back to that same game, you know, you've tried to take advantage of the fact that you've got better technology than the last time you played it, and you find yourself going back to that title to try and experience it in a closer form or representation as you did in the arcade. And that game for me is Space Harrier. The first time I played Space Harrier was in Western Supermare. It's 1985, so I'm 10 years old. Now, when we were kids, my mum used to take us to Western Supermare as kind of like a treat. You know, it's a coastal town, so it's got arcades. There are no arcades in Bristol. There used to be one, Mad Harry's, best name for an arcade ever. But it was kind of a little bit seedy and shitty, and so, you know, we would never go there. But obviously she knew that we loved the Spectrum and that we loved playing games, so she would take us to Western Supermare, because that's a coastal town, a shit ton of arcades, and fish and chips. So we'd also have fish and chips in this little restaurant opposite Dolphin Square. That means nothing to anyone who's never been to Western Supermare. And then we hit the arcades, and the first time I saw Space Harrier, it blew my tits clean off. It was just absolutely fantastic. Now, I played arcade games, as I've talked about before, you know, in my Star Wars video, a lot before I played Space Harrier. But Space Harrier was a very, very special game, because it was kind of, it was the dawning of, you know, look what's to come. Look what we can do, you know, in the arcades. Here's stuff you didn't even think was possible. And that game to me was Space Harrier. The first time I saw it as well, it was the full sit-down sort of hydraulic cabinet. But yeah, Space Harrier was just, it was a wake-up call. It was like, fucking hell, this shit's amazing. I think I'm right in saying, I could be wrong, by all means leave a comment down below, that Space Harrier was the first true 16-bit arcade game. Also, it introduced Sega's sprite scaling technology, which meant while not being truly 3D, it could kind of, you know, give a sort of pseudo 3D effect. And also Sega's sprite scaling, you know, in itself was amazing. It gave us so many great titles. It gave us Afterburner, Outrun, Enduro Racer, Super Hang-On, and my favourite, in fact the pinnacle of sprite scaling technology, Thunderblade. I love Thunderblade. But yeah, it was just one of those games that I had to experience it at home. So the first time I bought it was 1986 on the Spectrum. Now, you're thinking, you can't do that on the Spectrum. It was a pretty damn decent representation of the arcade. In fact, I loved it. I really, really do still rate it now. In fact, find a video of it on YouTube. It's very, very impressive. It was ported by a company called Elite. I think as well, Elite were the first people to start sort of licensing arcade games for home on the Spectrum and the Commodore Neon, you know, the 8-bit systems of the time. I think the first game they did was Commando, which in itself was a fantastic game, but Space Harrier on the Spectrum was absolutely amazing and fantastic. I think they pushed that little sexy box, you know, in ways at the time that we didn't think was possible. And I enjoyed it and I loved it, yet somehow I still was kind of like, I want to experience it like the arcade, you know. I was arcade hungry. So the next system I purchased it for was my Sega Master System, which was the first console I owned myself in 1988. And it was actually released in 86 on the Master System, but obviously I didn't have one in 86. And I remember seeing the adverts, like the fold-out, you know, big poster that came in the boxes and came in magazines, and just seeing the picture, and the picture was a still of the boss from Stage 2, the twin-headed dragon, and just being utterly blown away. I mean, I knew it wasn't going to be like the arcade, but I mean, the 8-bit consoles at the time, based on people who had, you know, like myself, Spectrums, were just something, it was just technology we never even, you know, dreamed of. So I had good feelings and hopes for this. Now, It is technically my favourite representation of Space Harrier is on the Master System, and it's a pretty amazing conversion. It suffers from a lot of flickering. The sound's not too great because the sound is shit on the Master System, but it's a very, very impressive version of the arcade. It's, you know, it's absolutely brilliant, and as I said, it's my favourite representation of the arcade. I still play it. I have to play it on emulation these days, but yeah, but it still wasn't quite there. It still wasn't quite there. So the next time I purchased Space Harrier was actually on my Japanese Mega Drive. Now, yes, it was Space Harrier 2. I was always kind of annoyed and irked, you know, as a kid, that there were certain games that came out on the PC Engine but never came out on the Mega Drive. And I don't understand why. I guess it was sort of licensing and stuff, third parties or whatever. We know Shinobi was one, Outrun was another, although Outrun did finally come out on Mega Drive, Power Drift, and Space Harrier. And I don't know, I always wanted to experience the true, you know, original Space Harrier on the Mega Drive. I never got to, but I had Space Harrier 2. I didn't buy it outright. I actually traded my Rambo 3 for it in the back of CVG, because in those days you could actually trade games via mail with other people. And I always regretted it because Rambo 3 is the superior game. But that's not to say Space Harrier 2 isn't a good game. Yeah, decidedly average. I loved it because, you know, it was Space Harrier. Not so much the fact that it wasn't the original. I mean, they changed the guy's suit as well, but yeah, it wasn't quite there. It absolutely wasn't quite there. I mean, the Mega Drive isn't known for its sprite scaling abilities. You know, even though it's 16-bit, the original Space Harrier was 16-bit, it didn't have the same sort of, you know, technology going on as the original arcade machine. So when it scaled sprites, it didn't. It just had pre-rendered sprites of various differing sizes that it would, you know, use on the screen. And yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it. It certainly was better than the Master System version, but it still wasn't quite there. Now, the next time I played it, and this was full circle, was 2009 on Wii Virtual Arcade, and I was very excited when I got this because it was, alright, I didn't physically buy it, I bought, you know, a digital copy. Digital copies. But finally, at last, it was the true arcade experience. I finally had it. I mean, it didn't look so good on a digital TV. I guess I should try it again on a CRT TV. In fact, I don't have it anymore because I sold that Wii. Now I have it on my current Wii running in MAME. But yeah, that was like full circle. I absolutely loved it when I first got it on the Virtual Arcade, because it was just like finally I get to play true arcade experience Space Harrier, and I still find it an incredibly impressive game. It's probably balls hard. It was a classic example of what arcade games were back in the day. That there was more luck than skill with certain titles. You know, you were hammering your 10p's into that machine for the love of God to get to the end. But yeah, and yeah, absolutely fantastic. Now, what's interesting and what kind of inspired me to make this video is I just managed to pick up Space Harrier on the PC Engine. You know, the version that's always eluded me, mainly because I didn't have a PC Engine back in the day, and my brother did, but he didn't have that game. Now, it's not in a pickup video simply because I've borrowed it off someone, which is amazing. I've found someone else in my neck of the woods who owns a PC Engine so I can borrow games. But, you know, I'm not going to put it in a pickup video because why would you put a game? Here's a game I borrowed off a mate. But it's, you know what? While the Sega Master System version is probably my favourite, I have to say this is probably the best home representation of Space Harrier outside of Virtual Arcade. But yeah, very, very impressive. Very hard. Sprite scaling is certainly better than the Mega Drive, but yeah, it was just a blast to finally play it. But yeah, so I was just wondering, is there a game, an arcade port, I guess, that you love so much that as you progress through your hardware, you've consciously always gone back to pick up this title on these different systems so you can try and truly appreciate it as close as you could to its original arcade form? Because as I said, for me, that game was Space Harrier. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you later.